You're tuned in to the MtG Cabal cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cabal cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, and this week we are covering the incredibly wonderful news that came out of MagicCon Mini that was Wizards pulled its head out of its ass and figured out how to fix Magic forever, and that is to make Standard last 3 years instead of 2, with one BNR announcement every year.
Yep.
So let's take it away.
Yeah, so up top, there's going to be one yearly BNR, which is basically going to serve as a mini rotation. That is how WotC views this big BNR, and they said it's not just going to be for Standard. They'll roll in some other formats, but they still reserve the ability to make any immediate or necessary changes to any format. And they did give out one interesting guideline in that they don't want Standard to turn into this kind of mid-range soup format. So we have a ban coming up next week, or BNR announcement coming up next week. That was announced during a previous announcement of something else. So we expect to see a handful of elements go from Standard to basically tone down Rakdos. We'll see what kind of happens there.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing this does, for sure, is setting aside Pioneer and Modern. This makes Standard sets more relevant for longer. They will be around for 2 years. They will be around for 3 years, not 2. That allows these sets to play together a little more interesting than they had previous. Personally, with the way the blocks were set up and the core set in between, that felt like a natural cadence of every 2 years you rotate out an entire block.
Yeah.
So you have a core set, one block, and then you start a new block fresh in the fall. The 3-year cadence is a little more interesting and might kind of bring back that feel. Your thoughts?
So I think... I thought for a long time, and I think this may have been something I mentioned in the cast, is that I think Extended was the best format in the history of Magic, because the long rotation window allowed you to fix design mistakes down the road.
Yeah.
In set design, because you could say, hey, this was a mistake back then, let's try to print an answer for it in this future set. And that was kind of the theory behind core sets, was you'd always have Naturalize, you'd always have Pithing Needle, like these catch-all answers that could fix design mistakes. So on that hand, I think this is actually very good. The problem I have is these mini rotations. One BNR a year does not seem sufficient because of how awful Wizards of the Coast is at designing sets.
Yep. That still doesn't actually fix the inherent problem.
Yeah, the problem is just bad design or bad testing. I mean, it doesn't actually address that issue. And the thing is, I played back in memory jar days, so I remember the emergency banning where they just said, hey, that last Pro Tour, the results don't count. It's gone. Never happened. Like, I can't help but think something like that may have to happen, because we'll never get back to Aether Revolt Standard with one ban list a year. Yeah. And obviously that's a good thing because there were a ton of cards banned, but the cards were banned because those decks were oppressive. And that's my fear, is that it feels good because the product is live longer.
Yep.
Because, look, if it's in for 3 years, that's 3 years of printing and selling the product, which the point was made, and I can't remember if it was Aaron or Mero on Blogatog or Aaron on Twitter. One of them did say that while the sets are in Standard, they can be reprinted as needed. That feels really bad too.
Okay.
But I'm not a big fan of the annual BNR. I don't know what it does for interest in the format. To me, I played Magic for a long time. So have you. How long were people clamoring for a top banning before it happened?
SDT in Standard was obnoxious from the moment it hit, because it was being played in the Tooth and Nail deck.
Yep.
And Mana Burn was still a thing. And everybody played SDT that could afford it, right? So even the Tooth and Nail deck would. Which means you cast whatever spell you had to for green and X. You ended up with extra mana, and now guess what? You're just spinning your top.
Yeah, and in Legacy, people were calling for a ban for years. And it took them eventually pulling their head out of their ass again to be like, yeah, maybe we should do that.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and say from day one of release, people have been asking for that card to be banned in almost every format it's ever been allowed to live in.
And it took years and dozens of banned announcements for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Standard, not quite the same thing. Legacy's an Eternal format. But I'm curious how they're going to monitor the format. Are they just going to use Arena data? Are they going to use MagicCon or Pro Tour data?
Yeah, it's hard.
Where are they getting this? Because it's, from my perspective, Arena is, similar to Moto, a vastly different animal than Paper Magic.
Yep.
You can just have your collection and build it.
There's also the best of one and best of three formats.
Which are completely different.
Yeah, and there's really no promotion of getting to Mythic, or no reason to get to Mythic best of three or best of one, because there's no promotion at the end of that, really.
Yeah.
I'd have to double check to see if you can go from there and skip an RCQ or something. Like, that would be worthwhile, and that might homogenize the formats. But yeah, to your point, it is completely different because they get to you get to rather swap from deck to deck to deck a lot faster than you would normally, and it does kind of muddle what's going on because not everybody's going to be able to show up with the thing. They just won't have the ability to access the thing. 100%. No. My thoughts were very similar. This is hard to envision a re-up in the interest of Standard as a format. The mini rotations, I don't think that's enough to really rejuvenate the format. I think you need some banger sets, and you need to be able to prove, like, this is a good first step, and then it leaves the players saying, and then what? What comes next?
The article that they published on the mothership that was, we're revitalizing Standard. That's literally all they said, is this is step one. The end.
Yep.
Not expect more in the future, not we're making an announcement later. No, just the end.
Correct. And here are some vague outlines. What I actually worry about is that with seasonalities as we have them, it's going to actually play a pretty important part of the rejuvenation of Standard.
Yeah.
If we have two Standard, one Pioneer, and one Modern PT, that does a lot more than two Pioneer, one Standard, one Modern PT. So you got to plan to support Standard as well. Right now, we just had a Standard PT. We've got a Modern one coming up, and I think Pioneer might be after that. So we're not even seeing right now the engagement of this format. And it's also WotC running from one format to another.
Yeah,
they ran from Standard to Pioneer. Like, here's a new format, buy into it. Okay, cool, we did, but we're not going to support it. Well, that's kind of shit.
Yeah.
Then eventually they got around to it. Now they're supporting it. Now you want to rejuvenate Standard. Well, something's got to give. Do you give on Pioneer a little bit, or do you give on Modern? And hey, you can go 2-1-1 with your 4 Pro Tours a year, like you used to.
Yeah.
Used to do.
Do a limited Pro Tour.
Look, block constructed's no longer a thing, and I don't feel bad about that.
Me neither. Get it out of here.
Yeah, it was rank poop. Like, having to ban intangible virtue for a format that didn't actually exist was fucking ridiculous. Like, that seemed like the last straw for block, and then they decided to bring it back for cons, and everybody just played the same, like, 70 of 75, centering around Elspeth and your boy Siege Rhino.
Yeah, That's what it does when it attacks.
Yeah. And I find it hard to believe that this next step, the banning and not an announcement of the future of OP in regards to the formats is really going to do enough to rejuvenate Standard. But at the same time, I also kind of get it because I'm thinking about it now a little bit, and everybody's picking up on Lord of the Rings. Everybody's talking about Lord of the Rings. So it's like, that's the set that's coming next, regardless of how you feel about the lack of flavor or the negative flavor or inverse flavor on how the ring tempts you. It's all positive. It's no negative, apparently. Right. So let people focus on that. and then shift your gears to standard. Cool, that makes sense. I get it. It's got to happen at some point. So in true WotC fashion, announce and announce and announce and announce, and then 6 months later something happens. Like,
it's dumb. And I think, again, my worry is largely we are putting the cart before the horse here.
Sure.
Because I don't actually know if we even, if Wizards even has a plan for what's next. I trust Huey.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's, hey guys, this is what's coming in the future. They're just like, hey, fuck it, man, run with it.
They're playing it unnecessarily close to the vest, which is just ridiculous. Like, there's no reason to do that. Why do we not know what comes after Ixalan or whatever it is in the fall? Why don't we have any idea, what we should be looking at for Pro Tours? Why do we have to just kind of wait to see?
Yep.
It's unnecessary, especially when they do something like this, which is, in my mind, a very progressive and proactive move to try and jumpstart a format. No pun intended.
So I actually agree that this is a good move. I think, and I will say, caveat here, part of that is that I just generally prefer the way things were back when there were PTQs and a million other things. And we just don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it, admittedly, for me.
Yeah.
But realistically, I don't know that they'll be able to do it properly. But I think that them being willing to change and take a look is only good, obviously.
100%. And I think they said that Ixalan and Eldraine were not developed for the new world or the new world order, effectively. And so they were not designed with this change in mind, which makes sense. But it also means that by making that announcement, I think they're preparing people for not what happened with Aether Revolt and Kaladesh and the switching of gears of rotation after the announcement of a change in rotation at BFZ. I don't think we're going to see that, where things just go entirely off the rails and something has to be reversed. I think what we're going to see with those two sets is that they're going to be the last in this old world kind of view of, quote, single set blocks.
Yeah.
And after that, we are going to start getting these sets that are actually designed to play well with one another. Something that I thought about that eventually became to be addressed, I won't say addressed, but noted in the article, was that by extending the length of standard, it allows them to build more of what feels like a block synergy by extending keywords from one set, a brand new set, into others down the line a little more sparingly instead of just one and done scenarios.
That's fair, yeah.
And that I kind of like as well, because there are some keywords that just work out but aren't supported well. And one of the things I like to point to all the time is party. Party is an interesting keyword.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really supported well in the set it was in the Commander product it was in. And if you want to play party as a Commander theme, or even build a party cube, it is very difficult to, because some of the best options for you in regards to creatures are still the shapeshifters.
Okay.
And that's how you know when a tribe or a synergy is under supported. You have to go to the shapeshifters to spackle the gaps. This isn't Jurassic Park. We can just build more and better cards.
Yeah.
We don't have to rely on frog DNA here. And so my hope is that some of these forgotten keywords or underserved, underutilized keywords can see a little more use because they'll be able to develop out a little further.
Yeah.
And then maybe if something dumb happens, like energy, instead of just saying, oh, we had an answer planned, but it was coming later, they can actually plan the answer and put it in a goddamn set. I still don't know what the answer to energy was supposed to be. It's counters on a token, counters on a player, and solemnity or whatever it is, not an answer.
Yeah.
You needed a card like Leeches that just saps somebody's energy. Power Sink was already a card, but it drew mana, energy tap, etc. They already used all the choice names. Maybe that was the problem.
Yeah.
Energy Flux already used.
But yeah, I think the other problem I have with this is particularly from the LGS perspective. This doesn't do anything to get people into the store. This doesn't, like, your only way to queue at this point is RC queues, which people travel to. This isn't getting people in my weekly events. This isn't getting people to do more stuff. Like, it's just,
Yeah, this was something that I had a very hard time trying to pin down, and I leaned on you in the conversation we had leading up to this episode of, in my mind, as a vendor, the only thing I care about is like the last bullet point we set up in the notes, which is, do we get more print runs? If we get more print runs, as a vendor, now I need to plan my openings a little bit differently. I need to plan my dollar allocation. It's math. I don't want to say it's easy, but it is easier to figure out than an LGS who has to figure out, if we don't have standard FNMs, but we have constructed FNMs, do we start putting standard FNMs in? And if so, why would we do that? What are the players playing for? What's the goal? What's the interest here? This seems like something that needs to be supported, meaning standard FNMs from a foundational sense, and that means WotC has to build a good and engaging format with which players want to engage.
Yeah. And I think the issue too is, this doesn't get us. Like you said, there's no incentive here. Like, as long as Arena exists, I don't think there is an incentive to play paper Magic for standard.
Okay.
There's just not. The events are more frequent. They're play in your underwear.
Yep.
Like, they're just like strictly better in every way to run on Arena as opposed to in store. And it's infuriating as a store because I got nothing. Like, I have to come up with all of this on my own, get people in the store, and don't get me wrong, I appreciate the bone being thrown. But like you said, the print runs are another issue. I already don't want a stock standard product.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me that this gets an extra year of being printed into the ground and being made worthless? Standard cards were already worthless. Now they're going to be worth even less. I just don't know why you would do that. I saw a meme that encapsulated it perfectly, and it was SpongeBob, and it said, "Do you want to see me kill a brand that's worth a lot of money?" And SpongeBob had a hat on that said Wizards of the Coast. And then in the top right, it said Heroescape.
Oh my
and then
God.
the bottom frame was, "Want to see me do it again?" And it was Magic the Gathering. And I think that extending this to me as an LGS, this hurts the game drastically for me.
Okay.
From a design perspective, though, like I said, I think it may fix some things.
Yeah.
If Wizards can figure out how to design anything.
Yeah. It seems like because of seasonality, that would be the push for standard, which rolls back up to what I said before, which is if you're not supporting standard with more than one Pro Tour, how do you expect, or why do you expect people to engage with this format? And for me, this one seems kind of like a dead easy thing. Standard is your last Pro Tour of the year and your second Pro Tour of the year, or your first and your third.
Yeah.
Because that's when your new sets are coming. If you're still planning to have rotation in the fall, which I believe they do, the format rotates. You can put the PT right afterwards and go back to that, like, I don't know how WotC refer to it, but it basically is like the teams do better because they have more people kind of paradigm.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, it's like the majority of the people that go to a Pro Tour are teamed up. Because of Arena, they can just jam all the time.
Yeah.
And by doing 1 and 3 or 2 and 4, that gives people like 6 months plus in a year where they need to engage with standard meaningfully, and in the interim they can continue to buy the cards they need without having to re-up FNMs and let them play Pioneer, let them play Modern, what have you, and maybe use some of those standard singles that they're picking up. That one seems brain dead easy. If you do 1-2, if you do 1-2, you mean you only engage with people for 6 months, and then they're just not going to buy standard anything until PT4, the end of PT4, when they know they're queued for PT1.
Yeah.
It might also keep people grinding a little more to get from 1 to 3 or from 2 to 4, however you do it. And that's what I hope, is that they do these odds or evens kind of things with standard. If you don't, then you overshadow it, which is basically the last bullet point I have here, which is that this seems like it could slip really easily and muddle the identity of Pioneer on the whole and just make it feel like, quote, standard plus, unquote, which is kind of how Extended got.
Yeah.
And especially when you look at both of these formats, Standard and Pioneer, through the lens of Rakdos Midrange, a deck that plays almost the exact same in both formats, you just get better cards. More relevance, the wrong word, but more effective. Yeah. Cards. You get Fatal Push and things. No, not Terminate, but like those kind.
Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, stuff like that, and especially
more efficient. There it is.
More efficient. Cards. Yeah, that's the one. When you say it's like Extended Extended got like that when Mirrored and Released.
That's kind of what I mean. Like for people who aren't playing Extended, I guess we should just duck in on this one. Absolutely right. Mirrored and Releases, Extended becomes Standard Plus because you have to keep up with Affinity. And that means there are like 3 aggro decks that you can play. It is Affinity, it is Goblins, it is Madness.
Yep.
And if you want to do anything else, you have to be able to beat Affinity. So you could play like Sol Malka style Rock, which was like Ravenous Baloth and a bunch of shit to throw with Phyrexian Plague Lord.
Yeah.
Or you could play like Alurin and try and combo out faster because there was really no interaction from the 3 aggro decks. They just got on their bikes and pedaled as fast as they could to the end of the game. And so, Mirrodin kind of turned Extended on its head, made it very much Standard light. But the further that format went, when we got to, like, Zendikar block, and Extended basically became like, okay, Sword, Thopter Sword combo, Dark Depths combo, and like Knight of the Reliquary with the Eldrazi enchantment.
Retreat to Coral Helm.
No. The 7 mana value. Conscription. Eldrazi Conscription, right?
Yep.
That was a combo deck. I don't know exactly how it worked, but all that shit just shifted straight out of Standard into Extended, so it just became literally like Standard Plus, and it did kind of become this weird, goofy format that just didn't feel good towards the end of its lifespan. But that's also because, as we touched on in that episode, they shrank the rotational period down.
Yeah.
So you lost a lot of that good stuff from Mirrodin, from Kamigawa, that could kind of like change the format a little bit. And like I said, this could slip. The extension of Standard could make Pioneer feel very much just like an extension of Standard, an extended Standard, extended. Like,
yeah, and it was because of bad design that happened.
Yeah.
You can look at the last 5 years and you can realize they haven't fixed their design issues. So I that is where a lot of my concern comes from, especially because, at the time Mirrodin came out, Extended had been around for a while.
Yes.
Pioneer's pretty new.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a ton of card pool back there. It's, a few years. But we've still got incredibly impactful cards that have been imprinted in the last 2 years that are making waves across Eternal formats. That's going to continue to happen.
Yes, and they're going to continue to shape the format, which is great. You just don't want to see something like that, like specifically just looking at the Rakdos mid-range deck, because it's just the same plan in both formats. And when that happens, it's kind of like a perversion of both formats, and you need to figure out what's going on with your design philosophy that you allowed this to happen. At least when Standard was like green-based mid-range for like 6 years running, from Theros until like Aether Revolt.
Yeah.
Older formats didn't look like that because those cards weren't nearly efficient, despite the fact that Siege Rhino did make it into Birthing Pod decks. People were playing Abzan mid in Modern because of Siege Rhino, but it didn't warp the formats. It slid into already existing decks.
Exactly.
Like, Rakdos mid just has all the same cards, and the formats are built at their core the same because it's been this, like you said, same design philosophy all the way through. The same testing regimens, it feels like, all the way through. Some people will say
there's
Pioneer,
nothing new or good coming out of it.
Some people would say Pioneer needs a little more curation as well from the BNR to move things, shake it up a little bit. We'll see what happens there.
Absolutely.
But as far as this goes, if people buy more into Standard and that gets people rejuvenated in the game, by all means, bring it.
Please.
I'm excited to see what happens. I have my hopes. And at the end of the day, Standard is one of the best vehicles to get people into playing this game.
Yeah, it is. I just hope that they can bring more in-store emphasis besides an extended rotation. But hey, we'll see.
Yeah. Anything before we want to move on to picks?
Let's hit it with picks.
All right. I was first last time, so you can go this time.
All right. So there's been a lot of talk about Return to Ixalan. I don't know what it's actually called. I'm just calling everything Return at this point because Wizards has run out of original ideas, so I have two. Everyone's saying Polyraptor, Rampaging Ferocidon, all these cards. Look, man, they may or may not be good with dinosaurs. But you know what card is definitely good with dinosaurs and every other tribe we get in Ixalan? Vanquisher's Banner from the original Ixalan.
Yep.
Why am I picking this card now? Well, because it's a tribal card and we're getting a tribal set. It's that simple. Also, about a week ago, it cratered to its all-time low, and we are just now ticking back up. It can be had for sub $5 now. Well, maybe a couple copies sub $5 before shipping. But this is a card that obviously just gets better with time. The more tribes we get that are better, the better this card is. We have also had recently a ton of reprints of this card. So it was in Brothers War and the Retro Border. It was in the Mom Commander deck, which has started drying up. So that's Time Spiral Remastered was the Retro Border. My apologies. Yeah. But we've had 2 reprints in the last couple of years. This is not the kind of thing, and obviously, Kindred Discovery, everything like that exists. They seem to be iterating on tribal themes more than they seem to be reproducing old ones, like Vanquisher's Banner.
Yep. Yeah.
So my expectation is with us just having had this card printed, and I believe it was the Knight deck and Mom, there's no reason for this card to be reprinted anytime soon. I think it has really low reprint equity. I think it has a lot of growth potential. Not to mention, while we know that Ikoria is going to be some kind of beast set, because it's Ikoria, maybe we get beasts. Maybe there's tribal support there. Doctor Who's probably going to have tribal support because Daleks exist.
Yep, Cybermen. Doctor Who only has like 4 villains total.
Exactly.
And it's all
they're just repeated over and over.
Yeah, and it's all a group of something.
Yeah. So there's a lot of room for this card to grow. Quantity-wise, I'm still sitting on about, I think it's 12 last I counted. I have a playset of Foil Russian because I'm an idiot. Don't do that. But I'd be sitting at this price, I'd sink $50 to $60 in it. Just sit on them, put them in a box, and wait.
Yeah. Because
this is something that I think, while it is steadily increasing from being at all-time low, that obviously doesn't really mean much because it was the all-time low. Now, we do have a little bit of time, and I don't know that it's going to rise quickly up to a level where we want it to be. That said, this card is just good to stock in general. It's a generic casual tribal card. You can never have too many of those. I like it a little bit more than Coat of Arms because it's asymmetrical. It also draws you cards and is colorless, so it goes in every single tribe, even the ones that don't normally draw cards like Wizards.
Yep. Just
a solid card. I think it's way more reliable than some random dinosaur that combos with Polyraptor. You know why? A lot of things combo with Polyraptor.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, pick a card that combos with Polyraptor and then just go look at Polyraptor and what it combos with. And it's just hard to not combo with Polyraptor. The card is insane.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah. No, I like Vanquisher's Banner. It's ironic that we're talking about this as we're going back to Ixalan again, because when we were there the first time, the entire reason I had this card in my binders at all was for people who wanted to play dinosaurs, because I was playing Grimlock. And it's just, it's great. Vanquisher's Banner and Zendikar Resurgent for me are kind of like one class of creature buffs.
Yeah.
Coat of Arms and a few others are in another class. And I think there's this weird distinction that's very hard to grok. And it's that, like, the bigger your creatures are in terms of mana value, the more you need these pump effects to do something. And both Zendikar and Resurgent and Vanquisher's Banner replace the card.
Yeah, and that's huge.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's not just that Coat of Arms is symmetrical and thus a little dangerous if you're playing against another tribal player. It's just that it is really good with decks that have smaller or lesser mana value creatures. Mm-hmm. Slivers, goblins, merfolk, etc. And when you think about something like Vanquisher's Banner, you want to trade it out locally. you know, you might see that. You might see the dinosaur player. You might see the giant player. The horror nightmare. The Kraken. The new Kiora that just came out is yet another general for sea thugs, and these kind of cards fit in those decks because while those creatures might do something big and splashy, again, no pun intended, when they enter the battlefield, replacing them in hand to make sure you can keep going is super important.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I enjoy Vanquisher's Banner as a card. It is something I do play in Commander in those decks, like I said, that do use bigger creatures, and is definitely a card I want to have in my binder because at this point in time, we're so far removed from Ixalan and even the Time Spiral Remastered printing, that if you didn't get it in March of the Machine because you're playing Knights, you're not really going to find it anywhere else. It's gone basically from binders and a lot of storefronts. So overall, stocking this, not a bad idea. And the split we see in price is also pretty decent because, like you said, it just drops off a cliff. Now's the time to buy in. And then, in a couple of weeks, you can just roll it out to your binder and effectively, make profit binder grinding this card. 100%.
Solid.
Yeah. And as far as reprint equity goes, it feels like WotC just kind of does, again, whatever the fuck they want because they're WotC. But they also have, Heroes Podium and a bunch of all these other options to choose from. So it's not like they just throw a dart at a board. They're usually as pragmatic as they can be. And I haven't looked at the Knights list, but if that deck doesn't draw a lot of cards, then that's why Vanquisher's Banner is in there. So when we see the Slivers deck come down with the Commander set, will we get Vanquisher's Banner in there? No, probably not. We might see something like Coat of Arms, which works a little better with Slivers. They don't need to be drawing a ton of cards that way, and that's the difference. And I think it's just something interesting about these cards that people can, try and pick up over time. For me,
solid.
Yeah. For me, I'm looking at a card that right now is getting a little more pop from Pioneer than I expected. I thought this was going to be a Commander card, and we've kind of been talking about it for the majority of the week, thanks to the hype from this past weekend in our Discord, and it is Legion's Landing. Now, I'm not looking at this because of the recent spike as a decent pick. I'm going to go over a lot of that at the end of the day because of the way this is trending. I actually don't think this might be a great buy-in right now. If you don't want to try and flip it immediately, this might be more of a call to sell because I took these notes a while ago, and it's like every day that goes on, interest continues to build, the price goes up, which is kind of bad for speccing, especially as I discuss this further on. We'll get to why, but really good to just churn.
Yeah.
So, not right now. We'll get to the present in a moment. In the past, back in February when I added this to my list, CK was buying 45 at $1.80. There were 177 on TCG Player for LP or better. That's listings at $3.24. When I started writing my notes, CK was buying 75 at $3, and there were 196 listings, LP or better, for a market of 403 on TCG Player. Right now, CK is buying 91 at $3, and there are currently 175 listings for a market of 474 on TCG Player. So in a matter of days, this is basically just kind of like shot to the moon. Yeah. Now, as far as Commander playability is concerned, this is a light addition to both Vampire tribal decks as well as token-based strategies because it doesn't do a whole lot for both of them. Yeah, it makes a Vampire when it comes in. Yeah, you can make one Vampire turn. And that's the exact same thing for tokens. Yeah, it makes a token when it enters the battlefield, and yeah, it makes a token every turn. It's really not, overwhelming. But when you look at the format as a whole, it's nice to see that this does play in both a tribal theme and then token strategies because it opens us up to a wide audience of players. The play in Vampires is pretty straightforward, allowing players to maintain a presence and pressure throughout a game regardless of what the Vampire deck is trying to do. Some Vampire decks like to enter combat, some like to play a draining game strategy, others like to just look at their opponents while they play Soren, Markov, and Olivia. Who knows?
Yeah.
Now, I don't think there's a lot that needs to be discussed overall. The card is very much a read the card, explains the card thing here. And the token theme is a bit more interesting when you dig in. It seems like a lot of the token strategies employing this card want to go tall on tokens, not just wide. So yeah, sure, there are standout generals like Jazal Goldmane, but the majority of token strategies look like Maverin and Yoshimaru quote-unquote combo kind of decks. And they nibble away with some tokens before you just suit up a large power general or token to finish someone out. Jazal, I made a call out for. It's a little more interesting because it basically just gives +X to all of your tokens. So it is both a wide and a tall strategy at the same time, which doesn't kind of play into the rest of it. Now, what initially caught people's eye on this card was the interaction between Sorius Imperius Bloodlord's -3 ability and the Galta and Mavrin team up, and the thought that there might be either an Abzan Vampire list coming for Commander, playing into the second trigger of the team up ability, or a Pioneer list to play this quote-unquote combo. And let me bring up Galta really quickly, because it's basically a pseudo-symmetrical trigger.
Yeah.
And Galta and Maverin, here we go. So, whenever it attacks, you choose one. You create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur creature token with trample, where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures, or you create X11 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. This costs 3 double green, double white, and Sorin Imperius Bloodlord's -3 ability just allows you to put a vampire from your hand onto the battlefield. So you just turn 3 Sorin, plop Galta and Maverin into play, and just kind of go. That was the initial pop around Legion's Landing. Now, there was also theorized Pioneer lists and what could come of this, and that's where Landing could be utilized as well, both in the aforementioned way with Galta and Maverin, but it's also a bit of a speed bump to ensure you live long enough to play out this combo, so it could either play into it or just allow you to get there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, none of this actually has materialized yet. It's just kind of slotting into vampire decks and draining. Now, what actually happened over the weekend is that we've seen a rise in this Boros Convoke deck within Pioneer, and it is still kind of a slapdash kind of list right now. I'm going to bring an example one up. The cards with Convoke are Knight Errant of Eos and Venerated Loxodon. That's about it. The rest of the deck is just here to ensure that you can play these out and eventually win with a Reckless Bushwhacker. And if you're familiar with the idea of the 8-whack deck in Modern, that's kind of the way this plays. You just make a ton of little guys, ton of little nerds. You play one of your Convoke creatures, and then a Reckless Bushwhacker, and you just kind of win the game. Now, that happened over the weekend, and eventually, one of my favorite content creators came screaming through, Todd Anderson. Boros Blitz is the real deal, not Boros Convoke. Same card list, though. Here's my current build. I'll be tuning and writing a sideboard guide for Patreon later in the week. Link to Patreon in the bio. Cool. So that was on May 22nd, 4 days ago. At this point in time, this deck has just taken off in Pioneer. And as of this morning, we're recording, Thursday, May 25th, you cannot play a Pioneer queue on Moto to test because it is just this deck. That is what is going on right now. That's one of the reasons why I can't really say right now we want to buy into Legion's Landing as a longer term hold instead of just flipping into the marketplace, because there is hay to be made right now.
A lot.
So before all this happened, the timeline I had for this was, because this has been on CK's hot list several times, and I thought the last time was in prep for March of the Machines, as the buy list number hadn't quite popped yet, that they were just trying to get ahead of this Galta and Maverin team up. Now instead, it's on their hot list, they're sold out, and they are picking up to market. It was a 55-72% split compared to TCG market. Now we're getting close to like 72, like 85.
Oof.
Right? So we were 55-72, which is basically where Card Kingdom lies right now, unless they absolutely need a card, because they're just selling through it. Now they're up to like that. I said the 75-80 split. With the additional market pressure, despite Mopey's sales velo, I would expect to be able to move to buy list in the next, when I was writing my notes, I said 6 months. It might be as short as 3 now, and back into the market within the next few months. Now you can just flip back into the market within the next few days.
Yep.
And there is still a smidge of opportunity to ARB from TCG player to CK. You just got to really sort through these listings. All said and told, if I was going to be picking up this card now, I would still be playing the long game because this deck is still in flux.
Yeah.
There is not really an agreed upon even main deck, let alone sideboard. And despite the fact that Legion's Landing does play into the overall theme, people are still experimenting with what the best token makers are because they are really relying on a card called Gleeful Domination. It's a sorcery, costs red. It reads, destroy target artifact. If you control that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens. Now, Legion's Landing does not make an artifact, but Thraben Inspector does. Voldaren Epicure does. People are looking to figure out exactly what the proper synergies are and the proper counts are for tokens. Legion's Landing just allows you to play this longer game, even in a deck like this. If the board gets swept up, you can do the same thing you could in Old Standard and the same thing you can do in Commander. Make a token every turn. Now, the reprint equity on this, I think, is low to none, as this would either have to be in a Commander deck, and there's no either. It has to be in a Commander deck. And WotC has bemoaned flip cards in Commander product. Yeah. And I really don't think this hits a supplemental draft set because you got to do a lot of flip cards like this, and this is attached to Ixalan.
Yeah.
And the next Ixalan set we're going to, we know for certain, is below the surface. We know that 100%. We've known that for a while. All the flip cards above the surface. Now, by quantity, this caught me off guard, so I only have the couple from playing Standard at that point in time. With the way the market is moving, if you wanted to flip back in, if you're fine waiting for that, you could be really aggressive with this and buy out the low-hanging fruit and relist at a higher price, and you'll probably sell out within the week. If you wanted to buy in now and kind of take your time on this, I could see throwing 56 would be 14, so yeah, probably $48 to $50 and get 3 play sets of this. It is a 2 of in this deck right now, so if you want to move it to Pioneer players in time because this deck sticks around, cool. That's an easy number to move, and over time you'll be able to move the rest between local Vampire players and buy list in time. And it's not like they don't try and juice the Vampire theme, so there will be a point in time where a local will look for Vampire cards.
Yeah. Vampires are like the weird pseudo universally acceptable fringe tribe. It's not like they can just throw them in any set and it makes sense is the main thing. And I think when you talk about reprint equity, that's one of the reasons this card is good, because it can't just be thrown into any set. Correct. It has to be a set that has pirates and vampires. Because if you don't have that, then it's not good enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to put it in there. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think I like the card a lot. I think there are a lot of cards in Ixalan, and I do want to say neither of us knew that we were both picking cards from this block before the episode.
Nope.
I don't give my picks until the day of. But I think there's a lot of hidden gems in Ixalan in general.
Yes.
And I think that outside of Todd Anderson, this was one of them to me.
For what it's worth, going back to the vampire note, it's a really good call out. We get a lot of vampires. Look at Streets of New Capenna. We got Grixis vampires, but we actually don't get a lot of anymore? The white or Orzhov vampire.
Sure.
We're going back to the mono black and Rakdos kind of vampire stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, not only are vampires kind of throw-ins, we need little bit the piratey theme. We need flip cards, but we also need the idea of the white or the Orzhov vampire again. So that's a good call out. I didn't even think about that. It was just vampires are Mardu now, so whatever, it just works.
Yeah.
And I forgot how much of a struggle it is or was to actually locate a decently playable white vampire. Otherwise, what is white doing in your Markov deck?
Like Alenda?
Yeah. And Tesa, Markov, or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
About it.
None of those count. So.
Yeah. That's about it. So.
Yep.
That's where I'm looking right now. So. Anything else about the standard rotation or picks before we cut out for the week?
No, I'm good.
All right. Same here.
Yeah,
So.
let's call it.
For at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt I am Reptar. You are
At Thirsty Sizzler.
and we'll see you next week.